Good morning and welcome to another episode of Policy in Practice, where we sort of try to look at different aspects around governance, economy, and human rights. I'm Avdut Bharti, consultant with Social Policy Research Foundation, and I'm absolutely sort of thrilled to have Sharda Ogra with us discussing cricket governance in India and different aspects of it. Uh, Sharda Ogra is like a renowned sports journalist and writer, and has more than 3 decades of experience covering cricket as well as other sports. She's currently the sports columnist with the Hindustan Times and the BBC Hindi service. She's also sort of written for ESPN Cricket Info, The Hindu, as well as international outlets like The Wisden, and is also the author of several books. For example, The Test of My Life, From Cancer and Back. She co-authored that with Yuvraj Singh, as well as her book on the 2011 victory, It's Never Too Late, uh, as well as contributing to piece anthologies like Rahul Dravid, Timeless Steel. Uh, Sharda ji, it's an absolute sort of privilege to have you, and I wanted to sort of start off discussing this with keeping the cricket fan in at the center of this, uh, uh, because personally also, like, this desire to look at cricket governance and aspects around sports administration, they came from this uh, desire, or like when I was watching cricket, say for example the 2023 scheduling woes, or players sort of giving press conferences about packed schedules. So one wondered, like, why is the cricket fan sort of disconnected with cricket governance or sport administration in general? Because otherwise we are a very sort of cricket mad country.
Hi, Abdul. Thank you for having me on this podcast. What you've asked is a question that I think bothers cricket fans as well. To my mind, the cricket fan in India is completely passionate, very well informed, and I'm not talking sort of the social media generation. I'm saying this is well before,
Hmm.
and and well informed about cricket everywhere. I mean, they tend to know about cricketers in other countries. They tend to follow cricket that other countries are playing when there's television access, particularly. And the reason that policy is not part of the debates or the discussions, but you do know through, now I'm getting into the social media conversation, that you find out how much people are aware of what is being done wrong. They're able to call it out and all that. But the best way for them to show their protest is the toughest ways to say, I'm not going to watch. I'm going to switch off and not watch. Now, the thing about sport and about cricket is, how do you not watch? I mean, how can someone like me, who spends
Yeah.
months sort of writing about sports policy and sports governance, not be a sports fan? So you are sports fans, and in that vast bubble that sort of occupies your life, in a way, not little but vast bubble, how do you then detach yourself from the rubbish that is happening at the behind the scenes? I mean, I have said in my story that I wrote for the Caravan just before the World Cup in
Yes.
2023,
Yes.
that the Indian spectator experience is the worst in global cricket anywhere,
Hmm.
and it should not be so. But the point is that the fans in India are taken for granted. They are part of the backdrop. They make up these excitable people jumping around and waving banners and being seen on TV, and that's who we are. And we don't care. They'll always show up, no matter what happens. They'll always show up. So that's been the kind of the cynicism with which they've been looked at. We are seeing the Chinnaswamy tragedy that took place. The Chinnaswamy Stadium, was a walking fire hazard for I don't know how many years. One of the members, whom I know, had sent an RTI to them saying, when is the last time you did a fire and safety audit, and has got no reply. And now you're seeing what's happened. Now it's completely quiet. And there was, at one point, there was an absurd suggestion that they would stage the Maharaja Cup, which is like the Karnataka's
Right.
2020 league,
Yes. Yes.
in without an audience. And I said, look, that's perfect, because that's what they want. They want television. They want some journalists there. They want officials, players, and a few sort of people that are there. and then no spectators. And now with AI, you can fill in a stadium. It doesn't matter. It'll just look colorful and beautiful, and you can create noise and whatever. So that is what the cricket fan really means to the people that run cricket in India. So perhaps they are interested in policy, but they don't know where to go. I mean, do not start me off on ticketing and all the other stuff about matches and how they host them. That's another saga altogether. Um, you would, I think they read about it, they know about it, they are aware of it. What they can do about it is, because they don't have a uh, very clear, their votes don't matter actually. That's the only thing that matters is eyeballs and votes to people that get elected and so on. So that's why they get into this kind of uh,
Right.
almost what could they do? I mean, you tell me, what could they do? They'll hold banners and placards outside a stadium and protest, and then what will happen? They won't. The administrators don't care.
No, I mean, yes, very interesting. And you have also sort of touched upon this in the various sort of things you spoke about earlier as well. And yeah, you're right that the sort of cricket madness is there despite the governance not. And yeah, one only wonders that, if there was a bit of sort of attention to welfare where sort of we could have. And yeah, so, and this sort of brings me to the second sort of theme I had in mind is around the institution of governance itself, the BCCI, or the other national sports federations. In one of your articles, like you reference Pilke, if I don't know if I'm getting the name right, but a professor uh, who did a study around 2016. He was sort of mentioning how sports bodies are sort of this, they are positioned in a very unique way,
Yes.
where they are neither, related to this nor in that category. So, starting conversations of accountability, and this is related to what you were saying, that the fan does not really know who's accountable or where to reach. So how do you think this has come about, this unique sort of positioning of sports bodies, and is this sort of true in the Indian case, and like how does it sort of differ if it does?
I think your question is very interesting, because then that takes us back to before sports professionalized. What was
Absolutely.
all sport before it professionalized? Say in the late 80s, early 90s, with the advent of satellite television and so on. Sport was conducted by people. There's another phrase by another. It's not my expression. I borrowed it from an academic paper around this. Is that what used to happen in sports at that time was kitchen table governance, and everybody sat around and said, "Look, this is our club. This is how we're going to make it work." If you're talking about, say, a football club, and things happened almost organically. But with the advent of professionalism and certain increase in pay grades in that time, then you started getting in independent management, and then sport became this industry. Sport was
Right.
actually not an industry. It was a pastime. It had some livelihood, but not complete livelihood. You had amateurs and quasi professionals and all that. When
Right.
that changed, a lot of international sport was able to. It's still struggling. I mean, at the moment, it's still in flux, and all over the world you'll see this. You
Right.
go, and I'd gone to Kenya. You open a newspaper, and you'll find that some sports administrators, had some election scandal or something has happened. And this is in athletics in Kenya, where
Right.
they produce such incredible, like where Kenya just produces so many incredible distance runners. So it's still in a state of flux, but there are organizations that are sort of almost held up as best practice. So the Indian scenario has been sort of almost mixed up, or it's been contaminated by the fact that there's so much politics involved in it. There's political interference, because it started with sport was supported by government. Say, let's talk about post-independence. Sport is supported by government. It's supported by big industrialists. So the House of Tata or whoever it was, they would give money to send our teams to compete somewhere. I mean,
Right.
I'm
Right.
possibly missing out some big names. You'll excuse me. And it was all almost like it was run as almost like a corporate social responsibility in that sense,
Right.
that okay,
Right.
this is the money that this industrialist can put in. Let's get the team going. There'll be a politician who will then say, look, I'll be in charge of this thing, and I'll raise money to send you people.
Hmm.
And what happened in the Indian context is that the politician is now have became so much a part in, say, non-cricket. I'm talking in cricket, you had the princes and industrialists, and then became bureaucrats, and that's the mix that's sort of there. The
Right.
politicians were stuck with the Olympic sports, which is sports that came from the hinterland, whether you had wrestling, whether you had running, whatever it was.
Right.
You had the army involved as well. And I always say this, that had it not been for government intervention in Indian sport post independence, we would not have had any kind of Olympic participation in sport at all. So the government had to
Right.
generate these jobs that they had to give, and it was reflective of how the economy was at that time. And that's the phase that. But the governance that governance structure is only now in the last 20 years has there been any kind of push and tug about it. So I began my career in 1989, and I know what it was like through the 1990s and how terrible all our sports were. I mean, cricket, it was almost like at that time the BCCI was not this BCCI. They were another organization trying to find their way on the Western sort of boardrooms and so on. And the moment
Right.
television became part of that calculation, everything changed there. But the rest of the how sport is run was in the same way as it's run, as it was run in X amount of time. And I mean, in say the
Right.
post independence, and because the money was going from the government to organize these things. So that's why we are in this sort of state, and our case is unique because of the involvement of politicians and elections to to basically change the people that ran every single sports organization, federation, association, call it what you will.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that, sort of walking us through that, sort of historically. And so I have like a couple of things that came in mind listening to this. One is, you've also sort of mentioned this earlier, that in the 90s with Jagmohan Dalmia, there was this push for that Asian bloc,
Yes.
and in the larger cricketing world. And so that has sort of changed with BCCI becoming like this very sort of powerful body. How do you think that sort of came about? And the other is about the government intervention point. Like, we have not seen that in the case of Indian cricket, like governance being like the state being involved in governance. And in other sports, that's one reason where we've seen certain push for social justice or accountability has happened, as you mentioned. So if you could just briefly sort of tell us, like, why do you think that's there in
Briefly.
cricket?
Briefly is hard. Okay, no, I know what you mean.
No, no,
But
I mean,
yeah, uh, the thing is that the BCCI for very long did not take money from the government per se,
hmm,
because it had patrons who were business people, royal, old royals and so on.
hmm,
It didn't take taxpayers' money. So that kept it separate from all these other organizations that are sports associations affiliated to the Olympic
hmm,
Charter, and I mean, sorry, affiliated to Olympic sport, and it sort of siphoned off. I mean, it sort of operates in that flow. So that's why the BCCI kept away, because they didn't take government money, other than for things like their only involvement was, we need permission to go and play in this country, that country. We need land to build stadiums, and you'll get it at a cheap rate. That's how the BCCI stayed away from
right,
government involvement. And as you can see, even with the sports bill that's been passed a couple of days ago in Parliament,
hmm,
they say, oh, BCCI doesn't have to answer to that RTI Act and all the rest of it. And they really didn't want to go to the Olympic Games, because part of that Olympic Charter means following XYZ criteria. Doping, I think, is the
doping.
one that they get
Oh,
particularly stressed out about. God knows why. Um, so, so you can see that they stayed and kept themselves separate. Now,
hmm,
what happened with all that money that started coming once television came in? You
hmm,
had, so NKP Salve, who was a Congress politician, he said, "What rubbish!" Why? I think he was refused a ticket in the 1983 World Cup,
oh,
and he said, "I'm going to take the World Cup to India." And then it was driven by everything. It was all that
hmm,
that push, that Asian bloc creation started from that. It started from a
right,
politician.
right,
So there were politicians in the BCCI always, from
hmm,
all parties. They got involved at
yes,
various state levels,
hmm,
but they were not ideological
sure,
expansionists, shall we? I use the phrase, inside the board,
sure,
and
sure, sure.
they sort of stayed. They tried to protect that little club. So
Yes,
the Rahul Mehra case in 2000, which he then took all the sports federations to court. saying that you're not accountable. There's no transparency.
Hmm.
How you functioning? You haven't had elections, and that like I think kicked off the whole process of these federations and these Olympic sports people being questioned and looked at. I think
Hmm.
the absence of actual funding from the government is what gave the BCCI a certain sense of independence, which has now become arrogance, which
Hmm.
has now become like
I
uh,
see.
mutually beneficial relationship.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. And so this the Rahul Mehra case, and you also in your work sort of mentioned that in the last couple of decades there is this, because of other
Yes,
instances like I think something around the Olympics and
yes.
some other scandals, like there has been this realization and this push towards accountability and transparency of these institutions. Where do you think we are at right now, and like what is like?
I think the legal intervention in this matter is what has led to all these these developments taking place and the case happening. It's actual legal intervention that has made a difference, because had it not been legal intervention, we would have still been in the same place. And the fact that where are we now,
Hmm.
and the fact that around 2005, so I don't know if I have time to tell you a story that when I was a journalist, I was trying to I used to work in Bombay at the time,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I was saying I couldn't understand how this pattern worked about how athletes didn't get their visas in time and they didn't
Hmm.
have tickets
Hmm.
and they reached without equipment. And these are not cricketers. I'm just talking about these are
Right,
Olympic
right,
sports
right,
athletes.
right.
I said, what is this? Government didn't give, government didn't give, government didn't. Actually, it's the
Hmm.
federations that were not doing the work. So government had the money and the government was giving the money, but the federations are not doing the work. So at this point, we are at a stage where now government has said now we can come. This government has said we can now take full control of sports in that sense.
Hmm.
That it's almost like it's wanting to take control of sport in many ways. You're watching with. I mean, I wrote a piece on the change in the draft between the official the governance bill and the
Hmm.
actual governance bill that
Right,
appeared, and all
right,
the
right.
mistakes and the omissions that were there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's almost like the similar thing has happened in the BCCI. So the current government wants to take control of everything, wants to run everything, wants to have its agenda pushed down everyone's throat in that sense if it can, put its
Hmm.
own people everywhere. So we are seeing this play out in a way that, I mean, the classic case of where do we stand is, says, look at the wrestlers case. Look at the case of the
Absolutely.
wrestlers that protested, and you tell me where we stand.
Hmm.
Where do we stand now? What is the so all the principles that are there in, say, Olympic Charter or in International Wrestling Federation or whatever it is,
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
can be absolutely uh, stamped upon and destroyed by an Indian sports administrator, but who faces no consequences. What has certainly happened is that the introduction of a tribunal that is separate from the courts is a good thing. I think
Right.
the creation of a sports board,
Hmm.
while there is criticism that it'll just be the same type of people are there, but it's at least there is some kind of, you can trace who made this decision. It's not in some ministry of law or sports ministry or wherever it's sitting. You can say, oh, this
Hmm.
person said that this is wrong or right. The whole, I mean, we are so new in sports governance in India. You're thinking
Absolutely.
about it, it's about, I'd say,
Hmm.
15, 16 years. When
Right,
Ajay
right.
Makan was the sports minister, he brought on that first round of legislation to say that you have to be recognized every year. You have to give us your accounts. You have to put your address and all
Hmm.
that on.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we are at a very basic. It's like we are at
Absolutely.
caveman status when it comes to thing. And the
Very interesting.
BCCI, it was always held up.
Hmm.
If I can just be not brief, the BCCI was always held up as this prime example of great governance that was going on. That okay, see, they make their own money. Now you're seeing that their refusal to accept independent management, to have a CEO or CFO,
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
don't want that. They don't
Hmm.
want to have independent management. In the person who's the CEO is not even called the CEO now. So the Lodha committee recommendations very clearly said a detachment of policy from management. That
Absolutely.
BCCI wants it to be like this. I mean, there are people, and I'll not go. So it's this detachment of policy from
Hmm.
management which
Hmm.
can happen all across the board in all these associations that there are. But that is a refusal that they don't want, because they don't want to give up the power.
Yes, I mean, there are like two or three very important points. The this national sports bill and the changes, and I do plan to sort of come back to that. But you also mentioned like the Lodha committee's sort of thrust,
Yeah.
and I wanted to sort of ask you a few questions specific to that committee, and like what sort of what the implications of that are in the current times. So the first sort of major incidents which led to this, and then the one of the focuses of the committee was on the conflict of interest issue, and the committee also mentions that the understanding of conflict of interest by the BCCI is at best casual. So do you think those issues persist, and have they deepened, and what are the repercussions for that?
Conflict of interest is a concept that cricketers had such a struggle trying to understand that it was hilarious after some time. It was frustrating to begin with, but it was hilarious
Hmm.
because you say no one is saying you are going to do anything. They're saying there is a possibility,
Correct,
but
correct.
I will not do it. So I think what has happened is that the Lodha committee recommendations, when they were it was almost that after being put in place in a way, something happened, whatever, there was progress.
Hmm.
There was actually, you had set up all these teams and everything. You had set up one state, one team, and so on. The
Right.
Supreme Court, under Chief Justice Chandrachud, went back on the decisions that the Supreme Court only had given.
Hmm.
So that was the strange thing. What did these people fight about primarily?
Hmm.
Term, age limit, and tenure.
Age limit,
So
tenure.
they just wanted to be there. Now, instead of having a measured argument, like you asked me previously, that when did India change from this Asian bloc to whatever, is when Mr. Srinivasan became president, and this whole big three thing they wanted to
Yes,
sign, that
yes.
we need more money.
Hmm.
So we should get a bigger share of what we earn because we are the biggest country in cricket and all the rest of that.
Hmm.
So it started with that, and then it became the big three, and the England and the Australians showed no courage whatsoever by standing up to them. I mean, zero. They always write articles about the BCCI and say they're terrible, they're terrible, they're terrible. Write about your own board that didn't have the guts to stand up and say, no, I'm sorry, we are trying to
Hmm.
look after everyone else. So we don't want a cut of this pie, but anyway, that's a separate topic. So the Lodha recommendations have completely been diluted.
Hmm.
They've been completely, I mean, they were turned around basically. So we saw what the priorities of the people that were running the sport and in the BCC, what they were, is to hold on to positions. I mean, I'm telling you now, every day I get emails from a couple of people in Uttar Pradesh saying that Rajesh Shukla, who's going to become the president or is the president or whatever, nominee president,
Hmm.
some title he'll
Hmm. Hmm.
get,
Hmm.
is that he should not even be there. And they're citing from the BCCI's new constitution and showing the
Right.
flaws. But nobody is going to pay any attention to it. So that's the state at we are. It's almost like it's gone
Hmm.
back to what it was.
Hmm.
The only thing is that you'll have an ombudsman and you have an ethics committee and so on. But there is
Hmm.
no independent management. There is no
Right.
independent thinking. So never mind, never mind management.
Hmm.
Um, and everything was done to please the people that were in the BCCI, the political class that had influence in the BCCI. It basically was from
Right.
it stemmed from there.
No, and it's like great that you also touched upon like the larger sort of international cricket governance around the big three sort of cornering a huge chunk. Jared Kimber made a beautiful documentary on this death of
Yeah.
a gentleman. I'm sure
Yes.
you would have sort of
Yes.
seen. And yeah, I mean, so this fact is a well-known fact, like the big three sort of cornering a huge chunk of the pie.
So go after number two and three also, no?
Yeah,
Challenge the people in number two and three. Say, what were you doing when this was happening? They say, no, we wanted money for our country, which is okay. That's a reason. But then don't be overzealous and over righteous is what I'm saying.
did you see the recent statement which Ravi Shastri made that on wisdom that BCCI should get more money?
This is Ravi Shastri being Ravi Shastri. What to say? Yeah.
Yeah,
I did see. I mean, what BCCI has huge amounts of money. They will always get money because of the fact that the TV channels are playing crazy rates and now are now scrambling to try and keep up.
right.
Um I mean, the question to be asked, I can very easily make a headlineable statement about Ravi Shastri, but I won't.
No, no.
But the question to ask is, where does that money go
Hmm.
down the line? Where does
Absolutely.
it go down the line?
Absolutely.
So Indian cricket's popular focus, I mean the
Hmm.
focus of say the fan per se,
Hmm.
which is what it is everywhere in every other sport, but it should not be of the journalists and people that are there, is
Hmm.
you are just looking at the IPL and you're looking at the international teams, the two teams that are there, the men's team, and now the women's team has forced its way in, otherwise you would have paid no attention to them.
Right.
That's all you're looking at. And there are about 1,000, more than 1,000 people that are there below. What is there? What are they getting from your
Hmm.
gazillion rupee crores, God knows how many crores profits you make every year? How much of it is reflected in that? Is there
Absolutely.
a fair amount of, why are your stadiums so shit? We could get into that whole
Absolutely.
why is your ticketing so random? So
Hmm.
it's not a question about money. It's not about money. The more money is not going to make them better. The more money is just going to make them more complacent, more greedy,
Absolutely.
and more entitled.
No, I think, and like, I think we should sort of get into that, the distributional aspects of that. And
Yes.
I think the Lodha committee also touches upon it. And in your recent piece on the caravan, you also mentioned how, there are so
Yeah.
many players which are like not IPL players, the domestic players
How
in
many
cricket.
IPL players will be there? We came
Absolutely.
up with a number of 70. Chalo, 70 is wrong, 100.
Huh.
Out of 1,000, what is that percentage?
Yeah.
And the answers you get for it, sorry, Abdul, I just
No,
interrupt.
no, please,
Answers you
please.
get for it
Yes.
are completely contemptuous of what is fair play and what is justice. No, but really, do you need more than 25 lakh rupees if you're a cricketer from Arunachal? What kind of a question is that? What is this? Who are you to decide? Will you be okay with somebody deciding what your salary is if your office is making X amount of money and
No,
they should be
absolutely
giving
not.
you? So one of the domestic cricketers said it's like having a job in which you never get a raise for 10 years. So who will
Very
stand up
interesting.
with that nonsense?
Yes.
So it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of us were just rowing. Priyank Panchal recently retired, so we were just
Yes.
rowing another sort of great career sort of coming to an end.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
like
Yes. Yes.
one of those guys, who's sort of completely battled it out
Absolutely.
in like lack of limelight, sort of. So
Yeah,
those
and
case
a lack
studies.
of fairness and a lack of sort of decency with reference to, uh, and nobody is saying that the BCCI per se at the top is the evil being. It's all
Hmm.
the way down the system. Like,
Right,
I mean,
right.
do not start me on Uttarakhand cricket like I wrote in that piece. Do
Hmm.
not even start there. It's all
Hmm.
the way down the system. Because again, there is no professionalization of management of funds, resources,
Right,
infrastructure,
right.
capability, capacity. What you have, nothing. They
Hmm.
don't want professionalization. They want transactional sort of administration.
So, do you think like some recommendations like the one state, one vote, or full members, only having the full members and affiliated members? Uh,
I mean, one state, one vote is a thing that happens everywhere in the world,
right,
in every public forum.
hmm,
In the Olympics, also you'll get. They said, "Oh,
right,
but they'll get bribed and all." Yeah, but at least try giving one state, one vote to somebody. Start it and see.
hmm,
There are also in other Indian sports organizations. There are also these fake vote givers, which I don't think the new policy has addressed. The new sports governance policy has addressed. State Olympic associations. Who are they? What do they do?
hmm,
They are just a voting number that's been put in there. So there is a certain that voting system
hmm,
is flawed, and it's flawed all the way
right,
down to the districts and and,
hmm,
and, and all of that.
hmm,
And I think it's the creation of a structure where you can go to some other party, other, because no sports federation. I mean, let's talk about the participation of women in administration,
absolutely,
in,
right,
in
right, right,
coaching,
yeah,
in
yeah.
whereas your best athletes now you're getting a large number of women that are competing at the elite level.
Hmm, hmm,
So that's what the issues are. There's some very sound ideas that are there that should work, but you
hmm,
need to have people with the, what do they say now, niyat in
hmm,
their niyat has to be clean.
hmm,
The niyat has to be that, okay, we are behind the athletes are at the center of the story.
right,
I mean, in cricket, that thing has been taken out of their power in that sense. The
right,
cricketers are such big stars. In
hmm,
Olympic sports, the Olympics athletes are just becoming big stars who can push back
hmm,
against administration. But we saw what happened with the wrestlers.
absolutely,
So you don't know what the power structures are for
hmm,
Bill. I mean, we know that the power structures for athletes that are not superstars is not right or fair in any way.
right.
But is there a means to address it? Is there something else? It just seems like it's one vast morass of injustices heaped up one upon the other, and we just somehow come through with.
Hmm,
My favorite thing now, I'm telling everyone, and I'm saying it here as well. The IPL ka slogan where talent meets opportunity in
right, right,
very
right.
Sanskritized this thing. So it's not that Indian sport outside of cricket doesn't have talent. It has massive talent. It doesn't have
Absolutely.
enough opportunity because these
Huh.
people have been sitting on their behinds for so many decades and not doing any work. All their federation bosses, state association bosses, district association bosses,
Right.
not creating enough event for these kids to play. That's the end of my rant for now.